sometimes never know how to start these, but we're just going to jump right in, hey? So you have clicked on this video because you're curious about where the name Kantency came from. And you likely have no doubts whatsoever that it is a deep and big story. So I would love to share it with you. Overall, there's one overarching story, I guess, of Kantency. She means perspective. Kantency ultimately means perspective. And we know that there's more to it than that. So, you now get the long version of the story. Ready? The very first thing that I did when starting this business was I wanted to come up with a business name. Because I wanted a website and I wanted it to I knew I needed a name. And as one does, I went to ChatGPT, still relatively new at the time. Also, ChatGPT was not as widespread as it became. It was still relatively introductory. And it was fantastic for exactly this purpose. So I didn't know what the business was going to look like exactly, but I had a feeling of what I wanted it to represent. And so I went to ChatGPT because one of the things I wanted it to represent was a concept that I don't currently have a word for in English at the time. I just got back from traveling. I lived in New Zealand for a year, Southeast Asia for 5 months, traveled for 500 days solo. It's a whole other story. So I had just come back from there, so my mind was just still in love with the world and the languages and the ways of the world beyond. So I knew fresh that there are limitations to the language that we speak. The joke is that there's probably a word in German. Germans probably have a word for this, right? It's probably a long word and they have a word for it. And so I went to ChatGPT and there were concepts that I was trying to convey, concepts that I wanted to find a word that would encompass this concept I was trying to explain. So I went to ChatGPT and asked it to help me find and pull words from other languages that represented different concepts. What are those concepts? The very first thing that I asked ChatGPT for was to ask for what are some words that represent how things aren't always as they appear. And it gave me a whole slew of options. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, you know what, they're good, but they're not there yet. So I went back to the drawing board. So I said, okay, I would now like to know what are some words to suggest how human behavior is often the result of a long chain of events rather than a single event. And it gave me a long list of words and their meanings. And there were two that stood out. Two words that stood out. One was a Sanskrit word called samskara, and the other one was a German word, Weltanschauung. I just looked up a pronunciation video and I didn't take good enough notes. Sorry, German friends. At least I'm not trying to pronounce bread. Brot. God, such a hard word. When I was picking kiwi fruit in New Zealand, I had some German friends and they thought it was quite funny when I would try and pronounce brot, because I would kind of overdo the R. I don't know how to do the R. So they said I sounded like a pigeon. So, whoops. Anyways, so Sanskrit samskara, it means mental impressions, recollections, or psychological imprints left by past experiences, indicating that current behavior is influenced by past events. Okay. And then the German word means worldview or world perspective. And I went, okay. And so I asked it some more, and it gave me some more prompts. And this prompted me to clarify. There's a couple words that were all very similar to one another. The Sanskrit word samskara, there's a Hindi word, samskar, and then there's a Pali word, sankhara. And so they're all very similar. And I said, can you please tell me the difference between all these three words? And it did, and still, not quite there, still exploring. So I went back and I said, okay, chat, I would like to know what are some words that also talk about genetic influence of behavior? Genetics that stem from past generations, or words that encompass how the behaviors of past societies shape the actions of modern society. And it gave me a list of words and a list of meanings, and none of them were quite hitting yet. We weren't quite there. So I said, okay, now I would like to know what are some words that encompass the spiritual influence of a person's behavior? And it gave me a list of words that, again, didn't quite hit. So I'm not quite there. All right. So then I asked, what are some words that describe the degree of control that a person has over their own behavior? You can probably sense a trend here. I was trying to find behavior-based words, and how our behavior isn't what we see on the surface. There's more to our behavior than meets the eye. Nothing was coming up. So after those couple prompts of really nothing coming, I said, okay, let's go back to samskara. Please tell me some more, the Sanskrit word. And so it told me more about the word samskara. And something about it still had some more digging to do. So then I said, what are some words that encompass the influence that a person's personal narrative or internal story and dialogue has on their personality? Again, you can kind of see some trends, and this is like some of the things I came up with were great and not quite there. Because keep in mind too, at the like they might be great words. They are likely fantastic words. I was looking for a word that I could use as a business name. And so some of the words are fantastic. They're just a little bit complicated for me to explain or pronounce or incorporate. So they didn't quite work. So then I went back to the drawing board and I said, okay, what are some other words for internal narrative and stories that influence personality and behavior? Trying to prompt it again, trying to bring back all the different prompts, and it prompted a couple different words. And one of them that it prompted up was this word vasana. So then I'm like, okay, vasana is interesting. Now, what's the difference between vasana and and samskara? And again, kind of going somewhere, I don't know. For a little bit, I thought that I would call the company Sanskara. I thought it would be Samskara Consulting. Because, I don't know, the word kept coming back. But then it felt funny, and I went, I really don't want to. Yeah, reasons. So then I said, what is a word that describes how there is no such thing as a wrong story, just a wrong perspective? Because you can tell that like over the thread of all these questions, I'm looking at the illusion of reality, the human behavior influences, the depth of human behavior. I'm looking at like societal influences to behavior. I'm looking at spiritual influence on behavior. And then I'm asking about personal narratives and internal stories and how they influence personality, therefore behavior. And then, I asked, what is a word that describes how there's no such thing as a wrong story, just a wrong perspective? And this is when it told me that there is a Japanese word called Kanten. And I was very curious. I went, okay, tell me more. How far back can I go? I'll go back to about here. So Kanten is a Japanese word. Probably could write bigger than that. Let's write bigger than that. Oh my God. This feels really weird. Kanten. There's a Japanese word called Kanten. And I had the whole chat thread saved in a Google Doc, and I was going down the whole slew of asking ChatGPT questions about Kanten. It has two meanings, okay? One meaning of Kanten is agar. And I can do that bigger, Karli. It's big for me, but it's still small for you guys. Oh, that's still... For some reason, I feel like I have to do capital letters. I don't know why. So one term is agar, which I previously had been explaining as a gelatin substitute at the bottom of Petri dishes, except when I was going through the ChatGPT thread right before this video, it prompted a different definition. So the real definition is this instead. So anyways, one meaning is agar. The other meaning is point of view or perspective. Simply that. It's got more explanations, like the deep point of view explanation of the POV side of Kanten is right here. And I really love this word, and I really started going down a rabbit hole with the possibilities of this word, because what it represents to me is a lot of things that I've been trying to convey. Just going to be sure. What I was trying to convey was that language influences the way that we see the world. It influences behaviors, or there are influences to our behaviors beyond our immediate knowledge, such as the language that we speak. That's what I was trying to convey with the word, and that was the concept that I wanted to convey in the business name. And so Kanten, I love Kanten for multiple reasons. One, it has two meanings. It's the same sound, it's the same word, but it has two different meanings. And in Japanese, it has two different characters. So in the Japanese language, when you say Kanten and you look at the language, you know which one they're referring to, because this same word has two different symbols, depending which one it's referring to. In English, or even auditorially, you don't necessarily know which one is being referred to. You need additional context. You need additional context around the word to be able to know what is being referred to. Which one are they talking about? I need more information, because it's not black and white. And I love what this word represents too, because the Japanese language now means that the people who speak Japanese, especially those that grew up speaking Japanese natively, they have a completely different viewpoint. Let's say that this is about science. Let's say it is part of a gelatin base of the bottom of Petri dishes. They would literally see science differently from how we see it in English, because their word for perspective is literally directly attached to the concept of science. They see science differently. In English, we don't have, our word for perspective is not attached to a meaning in science, to gelatin. There's no connection in English. Yet in Japanese, they are so closely attached, which means the language that they speak literally influences the way that they see the world and the associations that they make in the world, and it literally changes the way that they see things, which is amazing. I love that. So you need more context when you hear the word Kanten. Are you talking about POV, or are you talking about agar? Which one are you talking about? And so I loved this. Kanten Consulting. No, because I don't want to appropriate the Japanese language, and I don't want to take their word and disrespect it. I want to be respectful of their word and incorporate it into my own. So now I'm thinking, okay, what do I want to do? What else can this become? What color do I want? I want the color of, does orange show up? Shows up good enough. So now I'm thinking, okay, fantastic. I now have a word in a foreign language that represents perspective. What if I compare it with an English term that also means perspective? Because then I have two concepts, two of the same concept with different languages ultimately having different meanings. So I went to the drawing board and I was like, okay, Kanten something. And I like the 3-syllable. So I was like, okay, Kanten something similar to perspective. Went to ChatGPT. I'm like, what kind of words in English are similar to perspective? And it came and it told me Kanten view with a W. You can kind of see that. You can see that close enough. So Kanten view. I'm like, ooh, Kanten view. Kind of like that. So I did what all of us should do when we were coming up with a name. And I went to Google. And I typed in Kanten view, and I said, what pops up with Kanten view? And very glad that I did, because the first couple of things that popped up were of the adult content variety. Because you have view and POV and we're not doing Canton View. We're not doing Canton View. Always Google search your potential names, especially when you're trying to get creative. So then back to the drawing board again. What other words can I use that are one syllables? And I ended up coming up with just CY. You can kind of see that. CY. Now, I like this because what it ultimately is it is a homophone of the verb to see. It sounds the exact same. See and see. They sound the same, just like Canton sounds the same. Except we need more context for you to understand, what am I referring to? Am I referring to this see or this see? We need more context to understand the language and how it's influencing my perspective and your perspective so that I can better understand you. So all of this means that we have, I had a red. Where did my red go? Right there. So that's when I say that Kantency means perspective. This is what I mean. We have the Japanese word for perspective, and we have the English term for perspective, and they come together to represent perspective in the sense that it matters on how it influences the way we see the world. Language influences the way we see the world, and there are influences to our perspective that we might not even necessarily realize. Right? And so that was kind of it. That's all she wrote. And then when I started telling people about the name, my mom was the one that actually, when I told her the name, she goes, "Oh, you know what? It's kind of reminds me of can't unsee. Kantency, can't unsee." And I went, I like that. Not very many people have made that association since my mom. It was like her first association, bless her heart. And Kantency, can't unsee. Once you have shifted your perspective, you can't unsee a thing, which I absolutely love. And then when I was going back at the chat thread right before this video to remind myself of the prompts of how we got here, ChatGPT even says, because I said, okay, Kantency, purely linguistically, from a linguistic analysis perspective, what could this word mean? And they went, it could mean the state or quality of having a unique or comprehensive perspective. It's been there all along. The funny part, because you're already listening and you're already invested, so you want all the little tidbits you can get on the origin of Kantency and her name. It is obvious right now that her name means perspective. It was not obvious at the time. ChatGPT even literally said that it means perspective. That's where I was going with all this. Yet it actually took me a little bit to tell people that it simply means perspective. I did the whole explanation, and it took me probably a couple months to be like, oh, Kantency, it means perspective. Simply. Obviously, there's more to it because it's never just one layer with me, but you can't unsee Kantency. And that's where she came from.